So we're here in Kenilworth on the banks of the Mary River. This is an alluvial floodplain zone well downstream of the hill slopes of the upper catchment. It's one of the most actively eroding reaches of the Great Barrier Reef catchments, and that's because of a very problematic legacy from high volumes of sand and gravel extraction out of the riverbed a few decades ago, and the subsequent channel adjustments the river's had to make. Up until 5 years ago, within 7 kilometres from this point, we had 9 severely eroding riverbanks, up to 10 metres high and about 500 metres long. So up until this time, we were only able to put our resources into smaller scale bank stability issues, and mainly along the tributaries, using revegetation and the occasional large woody debris embedded into the bank to protect the tow. Our emphasis has been on biodiversity protection and the impact of sediment on water quality and downstream ecosystems. So we have these really big bank erosion issues here for a long time, but we haven't had the resources needed to deal with them. Now we have the urgency of reef health and making the reef more resilient, and also we have the support needed to tackle this scale of a problem. So at these large scale sites, there's different challenges to the smaller banks. We need a greater width of planting to compensate for the height of the banks. And we also need more time for tree growth so that the roots provide strength deep down in the soil profile. To effectively stabilise riverbanks such as this one, we need to incorporate semi-engineered approaches such as bank reprofiling, installing pile fields to provide rapid stability of the tow and to replicate tree roots for bank strength and tree trunks for roughness, with rock revetment, and critically followed by dense revegetation. And dense revegetation is critical to the success of the site. The piles are an immediate but only a temporary solution, and they offer stability for the tow for around 20 years while the trees mature. This approach comes with a bit of a high price tag. So this bank here in Kenilworth is losing about 10,000 tonnes per year of sediment, and the project is costing $450 per tonne. But when we enter into these projects with partners, the revegetation component alone through the Reef Trust project is only $100 per tonne. We've now worked on 5 of these banks using a combination of civil works with fencing and revegetation. Some of the great benefits of these projects have been the opportunity to offer solutions to some of the more serious issues of our existing landholders, but also to engage with new landholders who previously haven't taken on any river care work. And this engagement doesn't occur in isolation. It's part of a long history we have in the area, forming working relationships with landholders and the community through a suite of ecological and restoration activities. The result of this history is that when adequate funding becomes available, we can be ready with our partners and with our eager and informed landholders. When it comes to addressing catchment health through community engagement, what has worked for us is a multifaceted approach. So some of the key intentions that we found work for us are things like including the community in the direction of our organisation, also maintaining a stable staff base so that we keep familiar faces in the community is important. Knowing our river, its natural values, its issues, its industries and who's who in the community. Working with other local groups with common goals like Landcare, local councils and our regional group. Offering a wide variety of activities and projects to landholders that address multiple issues is important, like field days and citizen science activities, small grant incentives that address broad issues like biodiversity, water quality, grazing land management, for instance. And we also provide river-based education in schools and for adult groups. Starting with 1 or 2 landholders, we've seen a dramatic attitudinal change here. For example, here's Graham, and he took on riverbank fencing and revegetation on the Mary 10 years before anyone else along this reach. Neighbours said he was mad and talked long and hard amongst themselves about this outlier. But such neighbourhood and community talk's one of our greatest friends, as it plants a seed of possibility in the minds of those we don't yet know. And it also helps that some landholders complain to their neighbours about stock visiting from downriver, because without regulations in place, these people have a lot of influence on the local standard of land and river management.
These landholders have a great responsibility if we are lucky enough to be a custodian of a wonderful riparian area near a waterway. What we do on the land and in that riparian zone directly impacts what happens downstream. ultimately what happens in our reef systems.
Because we're able to address some of these high-level sediment sources through the Reef Trust program, it's enabled us to increase project uptake in this reach by 100% from 10 up to 20 landholders. Projects such as this one also have other benefits for habitat, for local water quality, and for the whole of reach resistance to the impacts of flooding, and thereby provide extra value to the resources that are put in.